Hey, fight fans, thanks for joining us and welcome to The Weigh-In, the show that spotlights the latest MMA bouts and the topics surrounding the sport. I'm Dorian, Mr.MMA Hernandez, and with me as always is Nathan Tyrone.
And today we're going to talk about UFC 188. Velasquez, Werdum, and it takes place in Mexico City, New Mexico, Saturday, June 13th. And take it away, Mr. MMA.
All right, well, we're going to start with the prelims, and the first fight on the prelims is going to be in the lightweight division. It's going to have Francisco Sickayan Trevino versus Johnny Hollywood Case. Right now, Trevino in his overall career is 12-0 in his MMA pro career, but in the UFC, he is 1-0 with his last win coming in March of this year. Case is 20-4 overall in his professional MMA career, but in the UFC is riding a nice 2-fight win streak with his last win coming in January over Frankie Perez. My weigh-in, I'm going to go with Case on this one. Trevino's on a very long layoff, and if the stats are correct, Case is coming in with almost a foot reach advantage in this fight. So I'm gonna give it to Case on this one.
Yeah, Trevino's got some excellent cardio, and you're right. He hasn't fought as regularly as Case, and we all know staying active keeps you in the win column usually for the talented fighter. Case is a finisher. Say what you like, he's finished more times than not when he's won, and so I'm gonna have to weigh in with Case as well.
All right, and our next fight is in the bantamweight division. It has Alejandro Diablito Perez versus Patrick Williams. Perez is the winner of the Ultimate Fighter Latin America for Team Velasquez in November of last year, for those who might remember. Williams lost his UFC debut in April of last year, so he's trying really hard to get himself in the win column. But my weigh-in, I'm going to have to go with Perez. Ultimately, if hunger could be gauged, then I said I might pick Williams. But because we can't really gauge something like that, I have to go with the person who, like the previous fight, is not over, not off a long layoff.
Right.
And Williams is coming off a longer layoff and a lot of pressure because now, losing his UFC debut, he loses this fight, he'll be 2-0.
Yeah, it's not a pretty sight for Williams. Listen, Perez likes to keep it standing, but Perez can grapple. Perez, this is his test period. He needs a good test, and he might get a pretty decent test in Williams. Williams, though, unfortunately hasn't won a fight since 2013, and that weighs in, heavy. So I'm going to go with Perez as well.
All right. Our next fight on the card in the prelims is in the lightweight division again. It has Efrain Hecho en Mexico Escudero, or Hecho en Mexico, I'm sorry, we made it in Mexico, versus Drew Dober. Escudero, for any of you might already remember or know, he won the Ultimate Fighter Season 8. Went 2-2 after that, was released from the UFC, then brought back into the fold. But ultimately, in his UFC career is right now 3-5, with his last win coming in February. Drew Dober, maybe some of you might remember, had a controversial fight with Leandro Silva last time they were in Brazil. It was, unfortunately, ref called it a submission win for Silva. It was later on overturned after evaluation by the Brazilian Commission and the ref himself submitting a report saying that he made a mistake. So Dober right now is definitely trying to make, I wouldn't say so much a comeback, but, trying to make up for that no contest. Because up until the fight was called, he was losing that fight. Yeah. So I'm going with Dober. I think he's the better striker of the two, definitely the better grappler of the two. And I think, like I said, anxious to redeem himself after that controversial fight.
Yeah. And Escuadro has a few finishes for his wins. He does have a few, but very few. And Dober, I like him for this. I think the big question is Mexico going to be an issue with him? Is he going to cave in to the pressure of the crowd? I mean, Mexican fans are wild. This is going to be a huge card. And, this could be something for a fighter who hasn't had the exposure that the UFC can bring to a fighter. If he can keep his wits about him, I think that Dober's going to take it also.
All right, and now I guess you could say the main event of the prelims, because I'm really looking forward to this fight. It's going to be in the flyweight division. Has the number 7 ranked Henry the Messenger Cejudo versus the number 13 ranked Chico the King Camus. Look, I have to do this, even though I try not to spend too much time on these prelim fights. But let's listen to Cejudo. 2008 Olympic gold medalist in freestyle wrestling, Pan American wrestling champion, U.S. Nationals wrestling champion, World Fighting Federation bantamweight champion, and since his coming into the UFC, has been 2-0, but 8-0 in his overall professional MMA career. This guy is a beast, and I'm going to tell you right now, if a win in this this fight could actually put him in the title talks against Demetrius Johnson. But let's talk about Camus. Right now, in his UFC career, he's 3-2 with 1 no contest. That 1 no contest was because he failed a post-fight drug test and came up dirty for marijuana. But his last one was in November of last year. So both of these guys are not coming off a long layoff, and they're almost very equally matched, except for, like I said, Cejudo's remarkable grappling background. But if I had to give my way in, I'm going to go with Cejudo. I think the 2-inch height and reach advantage in Camus's favor is not going to be a factor. And ultimately, Cejudo's strength and the pace that he can keep, I think, is going to be the downfall of Camus.
Yeah. And Camus is a decent grappler. He's got some pretty good takedowns, but Cejudo is a very, very good guy when it comes to takedown defense. And I got to be honest, Camus has not found the measure of success that a young fighter wants to find in a promotion such as the UFC. And so I'm going to have to give it to Cejudo as well.
All right, and now on to our main card. The first fight on that is going to be in the strawweight division. The ladies are setting it off. The number 5, Tisha, the Tiny Tornado Torres, versus the ranked number 15, Angela Overkill Hill. Let's talk about Torres. Torres is 7-0 in her amateur MMA career, but 5-0 in her pro MMA career, with one of those wins coming in her UFC debut. She has wins over Paige Van Zandt, Felice Herrig, and Rose Namajunas, all top contenders and all girls in the top 10 of the division. Okay, but all her 5 wins are by decision, so she's not getting over that hump and getting the finishes or the submissions that she wants, which I think is one of the reasons that she's been put in 5th place versus one of the other topper positions. Hill, 2-time amateur and 1-time pro champion in Muay Thai, 2-0 in her pro MMA career. Her last win was in December 14th at the Ultimate Fighter finale by unanimous decision. But if I have to give in my way in, I'm going to have to give it to Torres. I think this is an uphill battle for Hill, and ultimately it's
no pun.
Well, actually, I was kind of go for that one. It's going to be an uphill battle for Hill, and it's overkill because I think she's making too big of a jump in competitors. I think Torres is just going to be too much for her.
Wow, I mean, this fight is going to be one hell of a fight that Mr. MMA likes to call the slobber knocker. Hill is a standing fighter. If Torres can get her to the ground, Hill's takedown defense is okay, but I think that's where Torres will gain the advantage. There's so much hype behind Hill, so much hype behind her vicious, quick strikes, and will she live up to the hype? Will she live up to the hype again in Mexico on this crazy card with these super hyped fans? I don't know. The Tiny Tornado really has to do the work. She has to take her down. She has to beat her up on the ground because Hill is an animal on her feet. An animal. And so, in the end, do I think that the Tiny Tornado will be able to whisk Hill off of her feet? Unfortunately, I do not, and I'm going to weigh in with Hill on this one.
Nice. All right, and our next fights in the featherweight division has Yair El Pantera Rodriguez versus Charles Boston Strong Rosa.
Yes.
Rodriguez, for all those men remember, is the Ultimate Fighter Latin America winner for the bantamweight division. Featherweight for Team Velasquez. He is 4-1 in his pro MMA career, though. Still kind of a young and green in that one. Yeah. Okay, but let's talk about Rosa. 10-1 in his overall MMA career, but 1-1 in the UFC. But out of those 10 victories, he's got 8 first-round finishes, 7 of them by submission, 3 by TKO, and his last win just came in January. My way in off of it, I'm going to have to go with Rosa. I think that this is too big of a jump in competitors like the Hill and Torres fight. I think that this is a fight definitely for Rodriguez to prove himself, but it's just I think the plateau's just been set a little bit too high for him. My way in, Rosa for the victory.
Yeah, and this is an opportunity for Rodriguez to really show and prove in front of the hometown. This is, I know I'm sounding like a bit of a broken record, but you can't overstate the situation. It's going to be a packed arena. It's going to be a lot of Mexican fans, a lot of Mexican fighters, and the people who are opposing these Mexican fighters are not going to have an easy time. They're going to be intimidated. And Rosa, Boston Strong that is, comes from a town that's known for breeding fighters, known for breeding tough fighters at that. And if he can get over those jitters, if he can keep it from really getting to him, and he can effectively execute his game plan, I'll give it to Rosa as well.
Okay, in the middleweight division, the next on the card, the number 10 ranked Kelvin Gastelum versus Nate the Great Marquardt. Let's start with Gastelum first. If you don't already know, he's the Ultimate Fighter Season 17 winner for Team Sonnen. Has won 5 of his last 6 fights. This is his second fight at middleweight because in his last 4 fights he's had problems making weight. So it looks like the UFC decided, you know what, we don't want to see that anymore.
Yeah.
And they made him step up to 185. His last loss, though, was in January to Tyrone Woodley at welterweight. Remember, like I said, he'd been having those making weight problems.
Yeah.
Marquardt, I really can't say too much about him. He is 1-3 since his reabsorption back into the UFC. His last loss in January was by unanimous decision. So if I had to really give you my way in, it's going to be Gastelum. As long as Gastelum doesn't have any problems making weight, I think he should be able to beat Marquardt at least on the cards. Nate hasn't been great in quite some time, at least since 2012. And I mean, don't get me wrong, he has an impressive career, 12-2. So this is definitely a true test fight for Gastelum to show that he deserves to be in the top 10 in the middleweight division, considering I don't understand how you get ranked to top 10 off of just 2 fights in that division. But like I said, my way in, Gastelum, barring weight making problems.
Yeah, and who knows if it was the UFC or if it was actually his coaching team that talked him into going to the heavier weight, because they need to get paid too and they need to keep their guy in a competitive manner. Gastelum's a good wrestler. Gastelum has fast hands, real fast hands, and a possible future contender without a doubt. While Marquardt, coming up on a bit of a journeyman career, is more experienced. He's never been a guy who stands out as an impressive fighter to me. Now, that's not to say he doesn't deserve any kudos he has and any fans he has. I'm just personally not the guy who, is too impressed by him. I feel like if he's going to win this fight, he's got to force the ground. And I don't know if that's going to happen before Gastelum's able to knock him out. So I'm going to give it to Gastelum as well.
Okay, and next on the card is our co-main event. It's in the lightweight division. It has the number 4 ranked Gilbert El Nino Melendez versus the number 9 ranked Eddie Alvarez.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with Melendez first. Former WEC light heavyweight champion, 2-time Strikeforce lightweight champion. I'm sorry, it's not light heavyweight, lightweight, excuse me.
Right.
Okay, but since his absorption into the UFC, he's only gone 1-2. Okay, with those 2 losses both being title fights and one of them being his first submission loss in his whole career. Alvarez has been a champion in 4 different organizations. Last was Bellator, if you didn't already know. But right now in the UFC, he is 0-1 because he lost his UFC debut to Donald Cerrone by unanimous decision. So my way in on this fight, I have to be honest, I'm going to go with Melendez. My stats and careers are virtually identical between these two. And I'm not kidding you. They've both been champions for a long time during their career. Their stats, height, reach are virtually identical. Yeah. But what's not identical is their striking. I believe Melendez is hand over heels, definitely the better striker out of the 2. It's a shame that I think this fight is going to be just basically almost like a boxing match in an MMA cage, but ultimately I see Melendez winning this by unanimous decision.
Wow, I don't know if I'd agree with you that Melendez has the better hands. I think statistically, if you count all the power strikes, I think Alvarez has the better hands. You guys look that up. You guys chime in on the comment section. Tell us what you find out. Is Mr. MMA in the right, or did Nathan Tyrone get a little lucky on that one? Look, Melendez fights top-tier fighters. Melendez is a top-tier fighter. He hasn't had the greatest success since he's joined the UFC, but like Mr. MMA said, he's been fighting champions for the belt. He just hasn't had that opportunity or hasn't been able to capitalize on the opportunities given to him. Now, Alvarez, a recent acquisition by the UFC, came in following some of the most entertaining fights of Alvarez's career. Like I say, in my opinion, Alvarez is a little faster, and I know this might draw a little hate. I believe Alvarez has a little better wrestling. So, though it is a close fight, and really it's a tough one to call, I'm going to give it to Alvarez. I think that Alvarez wants to redeem himself off of that embarrassing and, well, semi-embarrassing. I mean, it wasn't embarrassing because he fought his heart out, but really he got beat up. He got beat up, and he wants to avenge himself over that. And so I'm going to give it to Alvarez. I think he's got the heart. I think he's got the talent. I think he'll have his hand in the air.
All right. And now on to our main event of the evening. And it's in the heavyweight division, folks. The champion, Cain Velasquez, versus Fabricio, the number one contender, by Cavallo, Werdum.
Ay, Dios mío.
We're going to start with Velasquez. 13-1 in his overall professional MMA career. In the UFC, 11-1, with that one loss coming to Junior Dos Santos when the
Just
UFC
flash.
made their Fox premiere.
Yeah, flash knockout.
Is riding a 4-fight win streak, but hasn't fought since October of 2013 due to all the injuries and surgeries. So now, let's go to Werdum. Werdum has went 2-2 in 2007 to 2008 in his stint in the UFC. He was released. Went 3-1 in Strikeforce with a notable victory over Fedor Emelianenko. Okay, and then has gone 5-0 since his reabsorption into the UFC. One of those wins also being the interim heavyweight championship against Mark Hunt. But I got to give you my weigh-in, folks. Right? Who of these two do you think will win? I know who it is. Yeah. It's going to be Cain Velasquez, folks. Okay? Barring injury, Velasquez is going to win this. And I think it's ultimately due because of the pressure and the cardio. Werdum has shown that he can gas. Of course, nobody's really been able to push him to the test since he's come back, because the fighters that they put him in haven't really been able to push the pace like that. That's where Verdum's going to get caught off guard. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of people felt that the Travis Brown fight was definitely an interesting fight, but Brown didn't push the pace on that one.
He's no
Velasquez is going to be a wet T-shirt on Werdum, and Verdum's going to actually end up regretting winning that interim belt, because he's going to end up in the cage with a beast, and a beast who's going home with his belt.
Oh, and that's pretty harsh. I don't think anyone holding any kind of UFC gold, whether it be interim or not, is ever going to regret that fact. Fabricio Werdum is an amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. He is scary. Now, I think his biggest mistake was not staying active during the time of Cain's rehab. He opted not to defend the interim belt and to wait for the opportunity to fight Cain, and I believe that was a big mistake. Staying fresh, staying active, that's part of keeping the winning mentality. And Cain is no slouch. Cain is a beast. He's got freak cardio for days. He's faster than lightning. His ground, though I would say leans more toward wrestling than it does jiu-jitsu, is a dangerous thing. He turned Antonio Bigfoot Silva into a fat fountain of blood. It was ridiculous. And there's no stop in Cain. He's got to be stopped. And so I think we're going to see an interesting matchup, and I would love to see this go to the ground just for the sheer spectacle of it. But I think it's going to maintain mostly on its feet, and I'm going to give it to Velasquez also.
Well, that's the whole card, fight fans. So let us know what you think about the predictions. Who are you going for? Who do you think is going to win? And just chime in when you get, and let us know what you think about the show. If you have any questions that you want us to answer. And more than anything, don't forget to tune into UFC 188. You don't want to miss that card.
Absolutely not. And if you're watching the UFC, then you should be on The Weigh-In MMA on Facebook, and you can live tweet along with Mr. MMA. Give him your opinion, because he's giving the opinions to the fighters, and they're giving it right back to him. It's a lot of fun. Check us out. Check Mr. MMA out. You can tweet us at The Weigh-In MMA. See us on Facebook at Facebook, The Weigh-In MMA. And of course, you already know, click subscribe down there at the on YouTube's. Is that what they're calling it? The YouTubes now? And thanks for joining us, guys. We really appreciate everything, even you naysayers. For we got like 2 responses, both of them saying, fuck you. So I'd like to say thanks for watching, and fuck you too, okay? You have a great time, and we'll see you next time on The Weigh-In.